Good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning. This is TFS number 55. Maybe I'll do all of these in black and white because it's primarily talking, and I guess it might use less bandwidth. Probably not, but it does have a certain stylistic charm, doesn't it? One commentator said they liked it. I feel like I might be stealing a bit here from Gavin McInnes because his podcast is done this way. But is he really the only one that uses black and white? I think Brian Lunduke does as well. Brian Lunduke is the Linux vlogger. Linux journalist, I suppose, would be a more comprehensive term for what he does. Yeah, well, as per usual. Running terribly late, and I don't want to call this filler, but I was not able to make anything very, very coherent in terms of a show for you today. Nothing that I could adequately prepare for. I'm going to comment a bit about the like and dislike button on YouTube. I just don't get it. I personally don't think I've ever used a dislike button, because if I don't like something, then going a step further to state that I dislike it in a very nebulous way is just strange and seems not necessarily aggressive to me. I mean, yeah, if somebody is like advocating something really horrific, I probably won't even use a dislike button then, because then at that point I need to make a comment, and I suppose that the dislike button would let them know that, but it's just such a strange thing to me, because it doesn't really add very much information. Neither does the like button, for that matter, but I suppose it's used algorithmically to judge levels of enthusiasm. I don't know how accurately, given YouTube's kind of interference with a natural flow of things. But yeah, speaking of interference and natural flow of things, I was just reading an article by Fred Reed, who is a Marine Corps veteran that fought in the Vietnam War and sustained injuries. He's an expatriate that's been living in Mexico and been doing journalistic work for a number of years, most recently doing columns for places like the UN's Review. So his most recent piece, he mentioned kind of propaganda and how it's most effective in very simplistic, repeated ideas. And I mean, this is nothing new that he's saying, but I think that's what's interesting, since despite the fact that, some of us have even been forced to read George Orwell's books, and Aldous Huxley's books in school, and our culture is permeated with this anti-establishment messaging, we still fall prey to these repeated things of Russia bad, Iran bad, Trump colluding with Russia, or, whatever other stuff that they're trying to put out there. It's repeated as a mantra that stifles the thought of enough people and makes them more malleable to receiving and taking on board information that cements the interests, that cements a sort of ideation that serves the interests of people who want to manipulate them for their own ends. And this leads me to ask the question, well, what the hell does it mean to be educated? And this is a question that I often mull over, because I talk to people who are supposedly educated, and there's a missing element. I'm not saying that I'm cleverer than anybody, or I'm better read than anybody, although in many cases, at least the better read portion seems to be true, or maybe not even better read, but more attentively read. And education to me is having a large enough amount of knowledge, a body of knowledge adequate to get a grip for the difficulties of civilization, and adequate to inspire the desire for cultivating oneself. And just coming to grips with how difficult all of that is and how it is an ongoing process rather than something that you can point to and say, well, hey, look, I am educated. Now, in certain defensive situations, that can be warranted. It's like, look, I'm not an idiot. I've studied. I know these things. But by and large, it just seems like it's it's an accreditation thing. It's not a actual, tangible, manifest change in behavior and competence that occurs with people that call themselves educated. And, I was accused by a commenter of beating a dead horse, but the thing about it is just because this information is boring, which is where that sentiment comes in, you're beating a dead horse, doesn't mean that the horse is actually dead. Some horses need to still be disciplined because they're quite alive and quite strong. That or they've had progeny that's running amok, destroying the stables and terrifying the cattle. And I'm not referring to people as cattle. I believe that's a very cynical thing. It does have a certain dark appeal to call people sheeple, but I don't think it serves the person describing that problem domain very well or goes very far in addressing the situation. I guess it does blow off some steam. You see, this is a very, very rambly TFS number 55. I guess I'll comment more on the black and white aspect. It does give a certain separation from day-to-day reality. Like, I think I've written a blog post on the Fractal Journal about this, how with a book or with just a voice where you have the theater of the mind via the radio, it's a different kind of experience than, now if this had been in color and in HD like it normally is, you would feel like you were in the room with me hanging out as like your buddy talking to you, which is fine. I still want to have that vibe going even with the black and white thing. But with the black and white thing, this is like, well, this is actually a conceptual space. We're talking ideas here, and this me you're hanging out with is not even like the me that chills with my buds. It's the me presenting myself as a kind of channeler of ideas. And I feel that that's an interesting and important distinction to have, and also a psychologically sound one to have, because it separates, this kind of almost a geometry of concepts from reality, that the reality that's ever eluding us. It makes it easier not to confuse the two. I hope I've sufficiently annoyed you with my word salad. Thanks so much for listening. I will try to do a better job tomorrow, because I don't think my schedule is going to be quite as full. But have a great time wherever time finds you. My main website is fractaljournal.com, where you will find stories, ideas, and more. Cheers, everybody. Cheers.